To the delight of Japanese speakers everywhere, J Horror July is done with, so I'm not going to butcher any more pronunciations. I'm not going to butcher any more Japanese pronunciations. Probably. But I did mention that July had 4 Fridays and August has 5. But I gave myself a loophole. I only called it American Remake August, not specifically about J-horror. So I remembered that a few weeks ago I did Looked and Read to Come In, or Let the Right One In, and that did get a remake called Let Me In, so let's talk about that. This was directed by Matt Reeves, and as my notes say, yes, the Batman, Matt Reeves, who also wrote the screenplay, and it was based on the original film and novel by Jon Eivind Lindqvist. I will say quickly though, Matt Reeves, the stylistic things between the two, it does make sense to me. But this stars Cody Smit-McPhee, Chloe Grace Moretz, Elias Koteas, and Richard Jenkins. And one of the first things I saw when starting the film was the word hammer on screen, and it made me chuckle a little, because for those who may not know, Hammer were a pretty prolific and popular producer of British horror films, mainly in the 60s and 70s, as I know. And I thought they'd disappeared over the years. I do vaguely recall, I think they had a resurgence. I think they did go and came back, but I didn't realise it was around this time, so it was quite interesting to see. It just gave me a moment. I mean, it's vampires, it does make sense. Very much in their wheelhouse. And as I've said before, I've softened on the idea of remakes. I mean, if you can see the original maybe with dubbing, that's probably still better. But if you have certain cognitive issues and things like that, and maybe like watching people's mouths not sync up properly with the words distracts you too much, a remake is a good alternative, as long as it doesn't go too far or just do something completely stupid with it. And when I first watched this, which would have been probably near release, so it's a good while ago now, I think I was too much in that mindset of, well, the original exists, this shouldn't, and I almost wanted to hate it, even if subconsciously. Watching it this time, knowing how I felt, I actually think I enjoyed it more. I mean, a lot of the cast here I do like, and maybe that's helped. You know, I've seen a lot of the stuff these people have done before this, since this, and maybe that softens me a little. And also, yeah, now I'm familiar with Matt Reeves, I'm kind of looking at the style and taking a bit more away from it. But there are changes here, and one of the first ones we see is it opens with the aftermath of the acid scene. So we know this guy's in hospital, he's burnt away his face, but we don't know why. Unless we've seen the original. Although we still don't quite know why. There is a change there I'll talk about later. But I'm fine with this. I don't have a problem. I mean, I've said before, I love non-linear storytelling. That's what this is. It opens with something that was 2/3 of the way through the film originally. And for those who haven't seen the original, it sets that thing up of like, okay, what's going on here? Why has this man done this? And then we see it. I still think the pacing from the original is fine. Like starting, I guess carrying on chronologically, but I don't object massively to this. One of the changes I really don't like though is the removal of the queer element. In the original we have Eli, who we learn through more supplemental stuff in the book, but was originally Elias, strangely enough, considering we have Elias Koteas in this film. But originally Elias and then was castrated. So, you know, that's an interesting queer thing, because it's not just, I mean, she constantly says, well, yeah, I'm not a girl and all that kind of stuff. But here it's just literally, I'm not a girl because I'm a vampire. The queer element is gone. I understand why, given the general audience, and at that time trans stuff was not anywhere near as acceptable. I know we've still got a way to go, but we've done a lot since even this was made. So I understand perhaps why it wasn't kept, you know, for having a more androgynous actor for Abby, and also a name that isn't Abby, which is very, very female. But one of the other changes that I really don't like is the changing of names for Hokan. In the original, he's given his name because he's not anything but someone who, well, as we know, had an attraction to boys, you know, a predilection for young men, shall we say. And that's what drew him, though. And it's like, oh, this isn't a girl. That's kind of in my area of interest, if you will. But that's gone now. But that's not what I'm bothered about changing. I fully agree with that. It's fine. You know, if you don't need it, don't include it, perhaps. But Richard Jenkins' character in this is called the Father. Some might say, well, maybe that's how he's been written this time. Maybe he is the Father. There are two things. One is in the film, one is a deleted scene that say no. Firstly, we see a picture when Owen's looking through her stuff, and there's a boy, and it's quite an older picture. It's one of those kind of photo booth things. She looks the same. It's this young boy. That is meant to be Richard Jenkins' character as a kid. So obviously not the father of Abby. Also, a deleted scene shows her transformation scene when she was bitten, and that's clearly a long time ago, well before that photo was taken. So that couldn't be her father, even in that situation. So I really don't understand why he was credited as the father. That was a massive error, and I don't get it at all. But it's relatively minor, unless you know that's what his character's credited as. It's never going to come across your radar. But I do think it's one of the things that annoy me. But the interesting thing about the removal of the boy attraction, I guess, is that's where the change comes in, that acid scene. Like I said before, we think we know if we've seen the original, but it's slightly different. Because they've removed that predilection for young boys, we don't have the locker scene. I'd forgotten, I thought it was. But it's in the car, so it's not the same at all, and it's just in the backseat of the car and the accident, all that kind of stuff. So the changes they've made, I do think they're clever how they make sure to implement it. I mean, even the fact that they keep the PE teacher as foreign to like the country that they're in. In the original, I believe he was Spanish, but because there's a lot of Latin American influence in the States, changing into some kind of Eastern European actually keeps that foreignness. Didn't need to do that. They could have just had an American PE teacher, but there's some stuff that they've kept that's just like, well, it keeps the feel, it keeps the theme of it, and I'm here for it. I do think a lot of the names are quite interesting though, because we have, obviously, Ely to Abby it's close-ish, it's 2 syllables, it ends on an E sound, that's about it. But Oscar to Owen, not an issue. I think one of the closest ones, well, not the closest, but one of the closest ones I think is Connie, the bully, to Kenny, as played by Dylan Minnette here. But I think Sasha Baresi, I want to say, I'm not sure how to pronounce her surname, got the best deal because the character's called Virginia. Exactly the same name. But again, I can see that there's an interest to do stuff well and to do it right. To not do anything that doesn't need to be done, try and keep things feeling as similar as possible, whilst obviously being mindful of cultural differences and things that perhaps they didn't want to talk about. So I get it. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I think doesn't work, like the climb scene on the hospital. It's much less impressive because she's not there for ages in like an almost closer shot than this. It's very distant because they didn't want to show the terrible CGI model, even though they've shown it in a couple of other places when she attacks people. Again, for the time, it's probably okay. But I do think that there's a lot of stuff that could have been done better. I think one of the things that really is different, and again, this is probably cultural, is it's a lot more horror forward as I've written it. There are a few changes here that I'm just like, this is very much leaning into the idea that it's a horror film, rather than perhaps a paranormal, romantic thriller drama kind of, there's very much more of a horror focus. Virginia looking back at him is kind of done very creepily. Even her scene, it's a lot more, she's biting herself, there's blood everywhere, and the whole room goes up, the nurse goes up as well. In the original, she knows there's something wrong, she doesn't want to do anything, and she just goes, yes, please open the curtains. There's a lot more of an emotional impact. It's not done as a shock scene, it's not done as a horror, like it's not a spectacle. There is spectacle to the scene, but it's very different to feel. And that change as well also leads to the fact that it's Elias Koteas as the cop who gets killed when he cracks the light into the room when she's in the bath. Like, she attacks him then. I felt that was very sad because Elias Koteas is, a guy that I really like, for one. Like, a lot of the stuff I've seen him in, I do respect him as an actor and as a person, he seems okay. But his character's really, sort of soft and friendly and, just wants to understand what's going on. And again, it's a very American thing, like, oh, this guy that you like, he's going to die. It's got this kind of thing. And, I mean, the scene at the end, the big, or one of the 2 big scenes that everyone talks about. I mean, the other one I didn't think worked at all with the blood. It was just thin, actually, by comparison to the other one, because you haven't got the emotional resonance that came through. But the pool scene being the other big one, the lighting was all off. It felt a lot darker and heavier, and I don't think that worked to sort of show the true horror. But one of the things that I really thought just completely undercut any impact the scene had was you hear a scream as she comes in. It's like signposted. There isn't just this calm and he's held under the water and all of a sudden there's people being dragged around. It's a lot more, again, big spectacle, typical Hollywood thing, unfortunately. So did I hate this? Did I feel the same about this as the first time I watched it? No. Did I think it was okay? Yes. But that's about as far as I could go. I don't think any of the changes really matter in a grand scheme. I think you could get away with just watching a dubbed version of the original if you can, and you'll have a better experience. But by all accounts, as a remake, it's fine. One of the things I do want to end on, though, because I would like to end on a positive after I've said I guess it's okay, is how it's just a little thing that I noted about the characters and actors, because obviously the names, they have kept quite a few close, but I found that one of the biggest changes in name also reflected in the actors. You've got Ely and Abby, and you've got Lena and Chloe. Again, you can say there's similar elements, but they're not that close. However, you have Oscar and Owen, which is pretty close. It's not too far away. Maybe start with the same letters, kind of guiding me on this one. But the actors are Corey Hedebrandt and Cody smit-mcphee. So even the actors have got similar names. Unfortunately, I don't think that goes across the board with everyone else who has a close name. But it's just one of those little things I noticed and thought I enjoyed and wanted to end on. But like I say, let me in. Could be worse, but definitely could be better. So next time we're going to get on the first proper J-horror remake, which will be Pulse. But I've got a few jokes for that that'll at least make it bearable. So I hope you'll join me for that and everything else this month. But until next time, as always, thank you for watching and take care.